Welcome back to the channel. And in this video, we're going to cover the Unity editor. We're going to cover its essential features and what the layout of the actual editor is all about. Before you can start any project, you want to get yourself familiarized with the actual editor's layout, understand the different panels that are involved, how to find different things, and that way you can then progress to an actual project. First thing we're going to do is we're going to open up Unity Hub that I have here opened up already. And previously we created this test project when we created and installed the editor and the hub. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a few moments. Go ahead and click on your test project. Go ahead and open up your test project and have that ready to go. Once your test project is opened up, you should see the same thing that I have here. This is the default layout that Unity provides all new projects. There's going to be 5 main areas or panels that we're going to work with. 2 of them are going to go hand in hand. These ones right here in the middle. So we have our scene panel. The scene panel is where you're going to be designing and building your world or game based on its genre or theme that you decide to come up with. The game panel or tab, this is when you get a chance to play test your game or when your end user is going to play the game. This is what they're going to see via the camera at any given time in the game. So those are the 2 main windows right here in the middle, the scene and the game. You call these game panels. You can call these, like this is the scene view and the game view. But these are the 2 different areas when you're going to be building and testing your game. Now on the newer versions of Unity, they have this little toolbar right here that these 6 different tools, or rather the first 5, you're going to be using these quite a bit. These are tools that are going to help you navigate and move around your scene to select different items, reshape your different items, rotate your different items. So we have the very top one, the view tool, the hand tool. This is going to allow us to left click on the mouse and kind of drag around our scene to different areas in our design. The second tool down is the move tool. This is if I had a game object in my scene and I wanted to move it from its current or original position. Normally, your game objects will live in this hierarchy panel. Currently in the hierarchy, we have our sample scene. This is what Unity would give you on creation of any brand new project. And the default game objects that it gives you is a main camera. I've selected the main camera and I'm on the move tool, and because I've selected the main camera and I'm on the move tool, I'm given these X, Y, and Z handles that I can then drag around based on where my camera's positioned in the world. And the second default game object that they give you is the directional light. Because we're in a 3-dimensional base project, we're given a 3-dimensional direct light as if you were in the real world. If we were to create this in a 2-dimensional game, you may not need that directional light in your actual game scene. The next tool is the rotate tool. If you needed to rotate an object 180 degrees, 45 degrees, change its angle of motion, the rotate tool is going to help you for that positioning. Again, you have your Z, your X, and your Y, and each color represents a different direction on the coordinate system. So for instance, let's go back to our main camera. I've selected my main camera from the hierarchy, and you'll notice that when you have selected a specific object, it highlights that section blue, and depending on which tool you're on, you may see some interaction. Like right now, I went back to the view tool, the hand tool here, for moving around. I can scroll the wheel on the mouse to zoom in to the main camera right like so. And currently this little pop-up is showing me what is happening in my main camera. And obviously there's no other game objects in our scene, so it's hard to tell what the camera is in fact looking at. But we'll come back to that on a next video. You have the scale tool. Let's say you wanted to scale up or scale down a specific game object. Maybe it's too big or too small, and you can use the scale tool to change the proportion size relationship to the world that you're building. And then the rect tool, this is also another tool for changing its size and or position at any given time. So these are the 5 tools that you're going to use a lot over the course of building a specific game here in Unity. And so based on us using the scene for our building and our tools, we're going to rely on this hierarchy panel. This hierarchy, as shown here in the default, the 2 game objects here, any given game objects that's in the current scene will be here in your hierarchy. If you have your player, maybe you have an NPC, you have some collectibles, or a spawn location, all of these different types of game objects are going to be here living in the hierarchy. And if they're in the hierarchy, they're in this specific scene. But let's say you had more than one NPC, but one is in this scene and one's in a different scene. If it's not here in the hierarchy, that other game object or your other NPC character will actually be living here in the project for all the different areas of your assets. Maybe it's going to be your art assets, any of your audio, any of your prefabs, other types of game objects that your game ultimately will have for the complete game are going to live here in the project panel. And that way you can have access to those game objects for different scenes in your game, whether it's the main menu, whether it's a level 2, a boss battle. Based on your design and the structure that you put together is how you would use those specific game objects. And that's what you're going to have, is that we're going to have an input and import all these different assets and creations that we'll have along the way. That's going to be here in this project panel. All the way to the right is the inspector. Now, as I was clicking on the main camera and the directional light, you may have seen some information popping up over here in the inspector. This gives us a little bit more detail into those given game objects. So for instance, our main camera has been selected. I can tell that I've selected my main camera here in the scene based on the selection in the hierarchy. Now in the inspector, I'm giving a lot more data about this game object. And one thing to note is that every game object comes with a transform. This main camera has a transform. This is called a component. The camera component is on the main camera. It also has an audio listener component. And the reason why these are components, because the little add component at the bottom allows you to add more than one component based on that game object's functionality. If I go to the directional light object, I notice that the transform object is also there, but this time, instead of a camera component, the directional light has a light component instead. So you can add or take away as many components as you need, but just note that every game object will always come with a transform component, which gives its position, rotation, and scale in your three-dimensional or two-dimensional world that you're building. Besides these main area panels, you're going to want to focus on the top header here. Right in the middle is a play button, a pause button, and a step button. So as you're ready to test out your game, you're going to use the play button to test out to see if maybe a player's moving in the right direction. Can a player collect a collectible? Do you get a death sound on destruction? All these different things, you're going to be play testing your game with the play button. Likewise, if you're getting through and you want to pause your game to test or change some values, you can pause your game and then maybe you can step through the instances. So let's say you have a patrolling enemy and you want to verify that it's getting to a specific position and turning around correctly, you could then step through and have it step through each iteration as it's moving along the way. And we'll go through different examples later on in the different tutorials that you'll see. And lastly, over on the very right-hand side, you have layers and default that are over here. Layers we'll come back to. This is where you'll keep different game objects or interact with different game objects based on what they are. But the main one for today is this default layout. What you see here is this default layout that Unity gives you. I would recommend that you move and you play around with the different environment here to get it to be set up the way that you like it. So for instance, what happens if I accidentally take this hierarchy? I can click on it, hold the click, and I can drag it off, and I can actually have these panels floating, or maybe I accidentally got rid of one, or maybe the game and I actually closed that tab on accident. How do I get these back? I can always go back to default, and I can always go back to the default layout, and that's going to reconnect all those different components, these different panels that are provided for us. Or you can test out the other ones that are given to you, and if you decide you find one you like, you can always save one of these layouts. So for instance, the one that I like to use quite a bit is I will go to the tall layout, because most of the games that I work in, this environment here for the scene has a good setup. And what I'll do is that I will take this game tab, I will click and I will drag it down below so that I have my scene view being built above, and I'm seeing what the camera sees below as I'm building. Now, likewise, I may put that back up here on occasion so I get a bigger area for my scene view for building, but ultimately the goal is the setup over here where I have my hierarchy and my project stacked on top of one another, where I can access all the different art files, audio files that I need. I can create them and drag them into the hierarchy as needed, or I can change their properties in the inspector as I'm building. And so this is the layout that I prefer. And if I wanted to go ahead and save this layout, I will go up to the very top, and I'm going to go ahead and save this layout so I have it for the next time. And I can provide a specific name, and I can call this my layout, and I'm going to save that so that I have access that next time. So if I go, like, say, for split, and then I want to go back to my specific layout, I'm going to go to my layout, and I'll have a representation of my layout that I can go back to in the future. So that's the general components of the Unity editor that we'll be looking at and using quite a bit. I'll reference all of these on different stages along the way. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.